really have to look after my worms today. It has been several weeks and I have not been able to look after them. So definitely today I'm going to do it. But first, let me just do this one thing. But then in the middle of doing that one thing, something else caught my attention. And before I know it, another day has ended and my worms were not cared for. How many times have that happened to you? Hi, I'm White Davy, and today we are going to discuss how you can manage your worms even when you're facing time restraints. We all have different schedules, and for some of us, we work best and we get more done when we have a rigid schedule. And especially if you are someone who procrastinates, then having a rigid schedule will help you to get your task done on time. Then there are those of us who get more done with a flexible schedule. What is important is that at the end of the day, your objective is met. So it doesn't really matter if you're what time of day you get each task done when you have a flexible I can't talk. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what time of day you get your task done when you have a flexible schedule, as long as at the end of the day your objectives are met. Now, if you are someone who tend to be forgetful, whether it is because that's just who you are, or maybe because you're too busy that you just don't remember all the things that you need to get done, jotting them down helps. And in addition to jotting them down, where possible, as soon as you remember that your worms need to be taken care of, go and get it done. What you want to do is to get yourself into the habit of not putting it off when you have to take care of your worms. Remember that non-living things can wait. So you have the dishes to do, maybe you have a project that you have to work on, but it's not a living thing, is it? So yes, the project is important. Yes, doing the dishes is important. Whatever you're working on is important. That is why you're doing it, apart from if you're just sitting down lazing around. But the thing is, living things are at the top of the list. They need maintenance more than anything else. So you don't want to be putting it off, because the more you're putting it off, you're going to break yourself into that routine of not doing things on time. Now, one of the reasons why you really need to consider having a good schedule for looking after your worms is that when worms go without food, without air, without moisture for too long, depending on how long they have to go without these things or how often they have to do that, then it may result in serious damage to the worms that may be irreversible. Now, I know some of you are going to say that worms will recycle their castings, but how good is that for the worms really? Did you know that if your worms stay in their castings for too long, it can become toxic for them? So with that in mind, then you don't really want to have your worms recycling their own castings over and over again, right? Now, the next thing to think about, what if someone was to restrict you from having the basic necessities of life, say food, for example, for a few days, a few weeks? How would that make you feel? You probably wouldn't even make it, or if you make it, you would be so malnourished, so dehydrated, you would be suffering, you would be in pain, right? So put yourself in the worm's shoe. I know they don't have feet. So put yourself in the worm's shoe and think about what is happening to your worms when they have to go for a long period without food. Not to mention that if this becomes a habit where your worms are not being maintained often enough and they have processed everything that is in their worm bin, then what is going to happen if you keep repeating this is, one, you may lose your worms. Two, even if you don't lose your worms, these worms will be affected physically they won't be, your production will go down, and the whole purpose of having them is because you want them to be productive, right? Because you want to reap the full benefit, the most that you can get out of them. So therefore you don't really want your worms to be suffering, because then your production is going to go down. And I know most worm farmers love their worms. They just absolutely love their worms. And so doesn't it break your heart when you see them suffering? So on that note, these are just some of the tips that you can use to ensure that your worms are properly maintained, so the worms are happy, because happy worms mean productive worms. Productive worms means that your garden or your worm farming business will be more productive. So I hope you enjoy these tips, and I'm going to be releasing a course soon on not just managing your time for worms, but it is called the brew. Yes, I am pretty excited because I'm working on a course that is designed specifically for worm farming businesses. And that course is targeted for people who have limited space for their worm farm. They have limited amount of time to get their worm farm set up, and people who would like to know what would be the best choice of worm bins for their worm business, because there are many factors that need to be considered when you are setting up a worm farming business. And so these three topics is going to be covered in that course. So if you are someone who is thinking of setting up your worm farming business, or you are struggling to find the time to maintain your worm farming business, stay tuned. This course will be released pretty soon. So if you enjoyed this video and you like to see more videos like these, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. Yeah man, time for grow.